A young man can walk with a machine gun, shoot a woman, and just walk around the apartment building, then come back and finish it off? That's bold. That's bold. He don't give a damn.
A bold move caught on video, now etched in the minds of the community. Mike McDaniel.
This after police say Cassandra Jones was shot and killed in cold blood Monday in the parking lot of her own apartment on Iberville Street. Her daughter, at a loss for words, spoke exclusively with WDSU.
I'm devastated. I'm heartbroken. I'm angry. I really don't know what to do or how to feel.
Her suspected shooter, B.J. Brown, still on the run. Those who knew and loved the mom say they were romantically involved at some point.
There were injuries. This was a classic domestic violence situation.
Her employer says Jones filed a temporary protective order against Brown, but later decided to drop it.
It is the most common type of case in criminal court where a victim will recant, or in other words, will want to come forward, will want to press charges, will want to have the system involved, and then will sort of take that back.
Rodriguez says a new law requires those arrested for domestic abuse to turn in their firearms, but it's hard to enforce. Still, in this case, Rodriguez says Jones should have been better protected by the criminal justice system.
We certainly don't expect a protective order to protect her from a person like this. He had been arrested at least 25 times. He was on probation at the time he executed her. There were multiple opportunities here for him to be incarcerated or to receive help or to serve significant time to stay out of her life.
Every morning, Cassandra Jones left her apartment on Iberville Street and walked to work. She had built that life herself, the job, the city, the future she was piecing together for her daughters. On the morning of the 27th of June 2022, she walked out of that apartment for the last time. Somewhere in the weeks before that morning, she had sat down and written 25 pages describing everything that had been done to her, the threats, the control. The night he came to her door at 3:30 in the morning and didn't leave when she asked him to, she named it, she documented it, she filed it with a court and asked the system to protect her. And then, without ever saying why publicly, she stepped back from it. 53 days after filing that petition, B.J. Brown was outside her apartment with a rifle. By the time her daughters arrived at New Orleans University Medical Center, they believed their mother had only been shot in the leg. They were rushing to hug her and hear what happened. A doctor met them at the door instead. This is the story of Cassandra Jones. The system that had logged B.J. Brown's name at least 25 times before that morning, and what happened in the 53 days between a petition for protection and a Monday morning in June. Cassandra Jones was born in Mississippi in February 1974 and grew up in Vicksburg, where she was a cheerleader and ran track at Vicksburg High School. She went on to attend Hines Community College. At some point, she left Mississippi for New Orleans, searching for something more stable, a better shot at the future she was building for herself and her children. She had 3 daughters, twins Jalen and Jania Blount, who were 19 at the time of her death, and her older daughter, Akilah Jenkins. She was also a grandmother, and according to Austin Baden, the man who eventually hired her, that little boy was everything to her. When Cassandra came into First City Court seeking financial and rental assistance, Badon noticed something beyond the immediate need. He later described the moment plainly. He sat with her, talked with her, and saw someone who had the computer skills, the people skills, and the kind of drive that told him she wasn't there looking for a handout. She wanted to work. He hired her as a deputy clerk. The desk she occupied at First City Court became a daily part of that community, and the people she worked alongside knew within weeks what kind of person she was: warm, outgoing, the kind of presence that made everyone around her feel at ease from the moment she walked in. That was the woman who walked out of her apartment at 1400 Iberville Street on the morning of the 27th of June 2022, heading to the job she had built for herself, in the city she had chosen for herself. The day she had planned never happened. B.J. Brown, 32, was a Laplace resident from Street John the Baptist Parish just outside New Orleans. By the time he appeared outside Cassandra's apartment that Monday morning, he was not a new face to law enforcement. He was, in fact, a face they knew very well. According to Street, John the Baptist Parish Sheriff Mike Trigger, his department alone had arrested Brown more than 15 times since 2010 on charges ranging from drugs and weapons to high-speed chases and domestic violence. Across all agencies combined, the full arrest count ran well past 24. Some of those arrests were for domestic violence involving Cassandra herself. The relationship between Cassandra and Brown had gone on for years, on again, off again, marked throughout by a documented pattern of abuse that court records made visible even when Cassandra tried to move past it. In 2017, she reported Brown had struck her with a broken broom handle, broken her phone, and stolen her wallet before fleeing into the woods. In November 2018, he was arrested again, this time for criminal damage to property and a second domestic abuse battery charge involving Cassandra. That case never went to trial because Cassandra told authorities she no longer wanted to pursue it. In August 2020, the two were arrested together after police found more than 600 doses of ecstasy in their vehicle, along with marijuana and a digital scale. Brown later told police Cassandra had no knowledge of the drugs. The charges against her were dropped. Brown received 3 years of probation. Then, in October 2021, Brown caused a high-speed crash on River Road that injured 3 adults and a child. He was still serving that probation when it happened. The court, with every reason to send him to prison, gave him 2 more years of probation instead. Notice this: 6 separate documented incidents, multiple arrests, a man already on probation when he caused a crash that hurt 4 people, and the court's answer was more probation. If you were on the jury that sentenced him to probation in October 2021, knowing what you know now, would that decision look different? Tell us in the comments. 2 days after that October 2021 sentencing, Cassandra walked into Orleans Parish Criminal District Court and filed a 25-page petition for a temporary restraining order against B.J. Brown. What she wrote in that petition was not vague. She described physical abuse, mental abuse, financial control, and sexual abuse. She detailed the early morning of the 27th of April 2022 when Brown came to her apartment at 3:30 a.m. and refused to leave when she asked him to. She described him striking her repeatedly with a belt, then punching her and forcing her to the ground. She called 911, but Brown fled through her upstairs balcony before officers arrived, only to return later that same night for his phone and his car keys. And she described Brown knocking out several of her teeth in a prior confrontation. Her boss, Austin Baden, told her she had his full support and encouraged her to follow through with the restraining order. Brown never showed up to the court hearing. And Cassandra, for whatever combination of fear, pressure, and circumstance the cycle of abuse creates, didn't either. The clerk of court later confirmed publicly that a temporary restraining order was never put in place because Cassandra did not proceed with it. Domestic violence advocates have since pointed to this as a textbook example of a pattern seen constantly in abuse cases, not a failure of character on Cassandra's part, but a reflection of how deeply the cycle of control operates on a survivor's ability to act. Notice this: Cassandra filed a detailed, documented petition describing years of abuse. Brown didn't show up to court, and somehow the outcome was that neither of them had to answer for it that day. At what point should the legal system be able to act on documented evidence of abuse without requiring the victim to be the one who keeps pushing it forward? Drop your answer in the comments, because this question matters beyond this one case. And if you want cases like this one covered with this level of depth, subscribe to Crimes That Happened right now. What we're about to get into next is where this story goes from a failure of the system to a race against time. At 9:26 in the morning on a Monday, Cassandra Jones left her apartment at 1400 Iberville Street to go to work. She had done this countless times before. B.J. Brown was already outside, armed and waiting. According to a witness near the scene, Brown approached from behind and fired at Cassandra. A neighbor in an upstairs apartment heard the commotion, looked out the window, and started recording. What they captured became one of the most widely circulated pieces of footage in New Orleans that year. The video shows Brown, carrying a long firearm, walking across the parking lot toward Cassandra as she lay on the ground, and firing again. The footage spread across social media with a speed that outpaced every official notification. Before law enforcement had reached Cassandra's family, before any official word had been delivered, the video had already traveled to phones across the city and beyond. Cassandra's 14-year-old granddaughter received the video, a child. Before any adult in that family had been officially told their mother and grandmother was gone, a 14-year-old was watching it on a phone screen. Her daughters, Jalen, Jania, and Akila, were contacted by people who had seen it circulating. They were being told to check their phones before they were told to prepare themselves. The twins, Jalen and Jania, rushed toward New Orleans University Medical Center, believing their mother had only been shot in the leg, that the injury was serious but survivable. They were racing to be with her, not to say goodbye. A doctor met them at the hospital and told them their mother had died during surgery. Neither police nor hospital staff had warned the daughters of the severity of her condition before they arrived. As they walked out in shock, a friend stopped them and showed them the video. That is how Cassandra's own daughters saw what had actually happened to their mother standing outside a hospital, after the fact, on a stranger's phone. Notice this. A 14-year-old granddaughter received that footage before any adult in the family received an official notification. Before a single officer had knocked on a door or made a phone call, a child had already seen it. If you think about what that moment must have felt like, drop a comment below. We want to know what stood out to you most about how this family found out. Within hours of the shooting, the New Orleans Police Department's Violent Offenders Warrant Squad, working alongside the U.S. Marshals, issued a second-degree murder warrant for B.J. Brown and publicly identified him as the suspect. But Brown was already gone. By that evening, he was approximately 500 miles away in the state of Tennessee, at around 9 p.m. That same night, Officer Darrell Tybor of the Erin Police Department spotted a vehicle traveling on Highway 149 with no visible license plate. He pulled the vehicle over on what began as a routine traffic stop. Brown stepped out of the vehicle, began shouting, was asked to return to the car, stepped back out, and then emerged with an AR-15. He opened fire on Officer Tybor, who was still inside his patrol car. Tybor returned fire. Officer Tybor was struck. He was life-flighted to Vanderbilt University Medical Center. The bullet that hit him traveled through his left arm, struck his clavicle, fractured it, redirected toward his neck, and exited inches from it. He was left with copper fragments throughout his shoulder and a bullet that remained lodged in his elbow. He was released the following afternoon, but has described carrying both the physical and emotional effects of that night ever since. Brown fled on foot into the dense, rugged terrain of Houston County, Tennessee. The manhunt that followed was one of the largest that part of the state had ever seen, more than 30 agencies, and over 100 law enforcement personnel converging on the area. Erin Police Chief Mark Moore led the operation and told the public directly they would not rest until Brown was in custody, whether justice came by a jury or by other means. Notice this. Brown had already shot Cassandra in New Orleans that morning. By 9 that same night, he had opened fire on a police officer in a completely different state. All of that happened in under 12 hours. What does that tell you about how far someone will go when they have already decided consequences don't apply to them? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. And subscribe to Crimes That Happened Right Now, because how this manhunt ended is one of the most unexpected details in this entire story. The manhunt lasted 2 days. Early on the morning of the 29th of June, 2022, at approximately 5:30 a.m., an anonymous driver was passing through the northern part of Erin when he spotted a figure walking along the road with his face down and hands in his hoodie. He already knew there was someone on the loose. He slowed down, the man looked up, and the driver said the look he received sent a chill down his spine. He recognized B.J. Brown from the images that had been circulating on Facebook. He called police. Brown was taken into custody without resistance shortly after. He appeared exhausted, hungry, and drained. 2 days in rough Tennessee woodland had taken their toll. The arresting officers used Officer Tybor's own handcuffs to take Brown into custody, a deliberate choice made by Chief Moore, one he described as meaningful to him personally. Brown was transferred to Houston County Jail, charged in Tennessee with attempted first-degree murder of a law enforcement officer, along with multiple firearm charges. And that is where the complications for Cassandra's family began. Notice this. Because Tennessee physically arrested Brown first, Tennessee held legal jurisdiction to prosecute him before Louisiana. The second-degree murder warrant tied to Cassandra's death would have to wait. Her family's case was put on hold. Subscribe to Crimes That Happened and turn on notifications. The next part of this story is where the legal system created an entirely different kind of pain for Cassandra's daughters. Brown's own recorded words from a police interview were played in court. In that recording, he told investigators he had been staying with Cassandra because she owed him money, $77,000 by his account. He said he went to get what he was owed. He said she wouldn't give it to him. And then he said, "I just lost it." When investigators asked how many times he had fired at her, Brown answered 3 times. He said the first one wasn't meant to end her life. That recording played in a Tennessee courtroom as evidence in a case that was technically about what he had done to Officer Tybor, not about Cassandra, but it put his own words on the record. Officer Tybor took the stand in January 2024 and walked the jury through what had happened to him on Highway 149. He described the lasting physical effects, the shrapnel, the bullets still in his elbow, and the emotional impact that had followed him since that night. He told the court that, in his view, the only appropriate sentence for what B.J. Brown had done was life without parole. The sentencing hearing, held in March 2024, gave Cassandra's family their first official opportunity to speak. What followed was not a composed, rehearsed victim impact statement. It was a woman standing in a Tennessee courtroom, looking directly at the man who had taken her family member and saying every single thing she had been carrying for 2 years. She told him what Cassandra had given him: shelter, food, transportation, time, and a kind of care he had done nothing to earn and everything to destroy. She told him Cassandra had tried to help him build something better, and he had repaid that with the worst thing one person can do to another. She said she despised him and would keep fighting for justice for Cassandra, regardless of how many courtrooms she had to walk into. She did not perform grief, she delivered a reckoning, and she did it with the kind of clarity that only comes from years of waiting for a room where someone in authority had to sit and listen. She thanked Judge Wolf, the prosecuting team, and the state of Tennessee for giving the family that moment. And then it was over the only courtroom where Cassandra's name had been spoken formally in a case that was technically about someone else entirely. B.J. Brown was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 8 additional years on the weapons charges. Notice this. Brown sat in that courtroom and heard his own recorded words played back, admitting he fired at Cassandra, claiming the first shot wasn't meant to end her life, saying he just lost it over money. And then a family member stood up and told him exactly what he had taken. If you had been in that courtroom watching that happen, would that moment have felt like justice to you? Or would the absence of a New Orleans trial still have left something unfinished? Tell us honestly in the comments. New Orleans District Attorney Jason Williams made clear after the Tennessee verdict that he intended to have Brown extradited to Louisiana to face Cassandra's murder case in her own city before the people who knew her and the community she was part of. He said he wanted Jalen, Jania, and Akilah to see their mother's case through in Orleans Parish. That never happened. In November 2024, B.J. Brown died in a Tennessee prison. He was 34 years old. Tennessee prison officials confirmed there were no signs of anything suspicious surrounding his death, and a medical examiner was assigned to determine the official cause. That cause was never made public. Chief Moore, who had vowed during the manhunt that justice would come either by a jury or by other means, acknowledged that both had ultimately arrived in quick succession. For Jalen and Janiah Blount and their sister Akilah Jenkins, the news came without warning. Jalen told reporters she didn't think they had fully faced the reality of their mother being gone yet. Jania said she hadn't even started grieving. The case they had waited for, the one in New Orleans, the one that was supposed to close the chapter, would never open. Austin Baden, the man who had hired Cassandra and supported her through the restraining order process, reflected publicly on her grandson, the little boy who was too young to hold on to memories of her. He said he hoped that, one day, When that child was old enough, he would understand that when his grandmother left this earth, he was the apple of her eye. Notice this. Jalen, Jania, and Akila spent over 2 years waiting for a trial in New Orleans that was always one step away. First, it was Tennessee's turn. Then Brown died before Louisiana's turn ever came. Do you think District Attorney Jason Williams did enough to push for that extradition? Or was there more the system could have done to get Brown back to Louisiana sooner? Drop your answer in the comments. This is the question Cassandra's family is still living with. Cassandra Jones was 48 years old. She had rebuilt her life in a new city, found meaningful work, and was the mother Jalen, Jania, and Akila raced across the state to be with when they thought she needed them. She was a grandmother. She was the kind of person her co-workers at First City Court described as family from the moment she arrived. The system she turned to for help had B.J. Brown's name in its records across more than 2 decades of arrests. It had her name in those records too attached to reports, petitions, and charges that documented what he had done to her across years. And on the morning of the 27th of June 2022, none of that record was enough to put him somewhere other than the parking lot of 1400 Iberville Street. Jalen and Jania Blount, Akila Jenkins, the daughters who found out their mother had died from a video on someone else's phone. Here is the specific injustice that no verdict can fix. They never got the trial in New Orleans. They never got to sit in Orleans Parish and watch a jury in their own city, in their mother's city, deliver a verdict with Cassandra's name on the charge. District Attorney Jason Williams had promised them that. He had said publicly he was going to make it happen. And then in November 2024, B.J. Brown died in a Tennessee prison at 34, and that promise became impossible to keep. What they got instead is that a man who spent years controlling and terrorizing a woman died in a cell before he ever had to face what he did to her in a courtroom that knew her name. That is one form of justice. It is not the one Cassandra's family was owed. If this case made you think about how we treat survivors who don't follow through and why they don't drop a comment below, what do you think the system should do differently when a victim is too afraid or too pressured to keep going? That answer matters. And it matters now, not after the next headline. Subscribe to Crimes That Happened, turn on notifications, and tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from. We want to know how far Cassandra's story has traveled.